What's up, guys? My name is Phil, and I am a huge Pokemon fan. I first started with Pokemon Diamond on my DSi when I was 7 years old, and since then, I've been hooked. I've played every single mainline game, almost every single spin-off, and since 2014, I've been playing Smogon competitive singles. While a lot of people outside the competitive scene see Pokemon as a painfully easy and simplistic children's game, well, you're not wrong. But the second you leave the main game and start fighting real people, it becomes a battle of wits, mind games, and careful calculation. A Pokemon battle can really just be described as a massively complex math equation. I mean, seriously, with damage calcs, EV spreads, probability management, and all that other stuff, the amount of math involved in a high-level Pokemon battle would have Albert Einstein rolling in his grave. But regardless, today I will be taking a look at one of my favorite competitive Smogon tiers, the RU tier. Now, if you're not familiar with the structure of competitive Pokemon, don't worry, I'll explain it in just a moment. But in this video, I'll be looking at the current Gen 8 RU tier and discussing the strengths and weaknesses of many of the Pokemon within, how they match up against other Pokemon in the tier, how to use them, and why you would want to use them over another Pokemon. So, Smogon competitive singles. What the hell is that? Well, Smogon is the name of the unofficial competitive Pokemon format. It isn't recognized by Nintendo and it's completely fan-run. Pokemon does have an official competitive league called VGC, but that's only 4v4 double battles, which is for nerds. Real Chads play 6v6 singles. Because we now have a whopping 905 Pokemon, and more on the way very soon in Gen 9, there's going to be a lot of stronger Pokemon and a lot of weaker Pokemon, so we need tiers. There are several core tiers in Smogon singles, and they're all based on overall usage. OU or overused, UU underused, RU, which we'll be talking about and is rarely used, NU never used, PU, which is a pun meaning that these Pokemon frickin' stink, and then the absolute bottom of the barrel is ZU, or zero used. The most popular tier is obviously OU because, well, as the name implies, the Pokemon are overused. But I'm a big fan of the RU tier. RU has those Pokemon that you don't really think about too much, but when you see them, you're like, you know what, you're cool, I like you. The Pokemon here aren't super strong, but they're not that weak either. It's a good middle ground with lots of potential for fun and wacky team comps. Currently, there are 36 Pokemon within the official RU tier, and 19 in the never used ban list, which basically means they're too strong for never used, but not quite good enough to really be in rarely used. I won't be talking about every RU Pokemon in this video because that would take like 5 hours, but I will try to cover some of the more common ones you'll see, and some that I think may be overlooked. So now that that's all out of the way, let's jump right in. Alright, so first up, let's talk about my favorite Pokemon in the tier, and my second favorite Pokemon of all time, Umbreon. Umbreon is an amazing support and stall Pokemon, so much so that I often stick him in my OU teams and he still fills his niche perfectly. The quintessential Umbreon set is Toxic, Protect, Wish, and Foul Play. The strategy here is pretty simple. Toxic your opponent, then stall with Wish and Protect until the opponent is dead. Using Foul Play is optional if you just want the opponent to die a little more quickly, or if you want to chip switch-ins that are immune to poison. Most of the time, this will only be doing around 20 to 30%, but it does hard counter Alolan Marowak with full attack EVs, which it guaranteed OHKOs, and Metagross, which is a guaranteed 2-hit KO before defense buffs. So if you don't have anything else on your team to deal with them, this is a great option to have. When looking at its stats, Umbreon has amazing mix bulk. With 95 health, 110 defense, and 130 special defense, there is very little that can kill it. Even a super effective choice spec Moonblast from Gardevoir will only do around 80%, guaranteeing a Toxic as long as it doesn't miss. As far as I can tell, the only things that can OHKO Umbreon before boosting are Heracross and Lucario close combats. Now there are a few variations of this set you can do. You can elect to swap Foul Play with Heal Bell to transition to a full Cleric role, allowing for reliable healing and status removal on your teammates. Now because there are a lot of other Pokemon in the tier that already like using Toxic, and several Pokemon with access to Toxic Spikes, like Cloyster, Roserade, and Tentacruel, you might think, well, why should I bother running a Toxic Umbreon? And you'd have a point. But fortunately, I've come up with a solution. There's another set that I've recently begun running, which I don't think I've seen anyone else use, but I've had some pretty good results with. That set is Yawn, Wish, Protect, and Heal Bell. Yawn is a great way to force out scary Pokemon that threaten to sweep your team, and it can allow for even more reliable support from Wish and Heal Bell. Yawning basically gives you a free turn to either click Heal Bell or Wish, and depending on whether your opponent decides to switch or take the nap, you can safely pivot to a counter, or allow another teammate to set up for free while being healed. I may be a bit biased here, but I would say that Umbreon is the best pure support Pokemon in the tier. It knows exactly what it has to do, and it does it perfectly. Now that I'm done gushing about Umbreon, let's talk about the other main stall Pokemon in the tier, Milotic. Do you want to wall your opponent without having to click Protect and Heal for 5 turns? Well, I got the Pokemon for you. With access to Recover, Toxic, and Light Screen, Milotic can also act as a Toxic stall while providing some support to its teammate, but Milotic has the advantage of being a lot more versatile. When it comes to stats, Milotic's base 95 health, 79 defense, and 125 special defense makes it strictly worse than Umbreon in terms of bulk, but its better defensive typing and mono water does give it a boost, being only weak to grass and electric. In addition, its base 100 special attack also allows it to dish out some serious damage while still walling opponents. The attacks you'll be running on Milotic are Scald and Ice Beam, or Hydro Pump and Blizzard if you're feeling saucy. However, it does also have Flip Turn, which won't do much damage, but allows you to switch out and gain momentum for your team. Funny enough, Milotic actually has the highest base special attack of any water type in the tier, and therefore has the strongest unboosted Scald, capable of 2-hit KOing every fire and ground type in the tier, besides Water Absorb Seismitoad, as well as doing good damage to threats like Lucario, Metagross, and Heracross. On the other hand, Ice Beam allows you to always OHKO the only 2 dragon types in the tier, Flygon and Noivern, as long as they don't have significant bulk investment, which they typically won't. Unfortunately, it doesn't help in the matchup against Roserade and Celebi, the only 2 grass types in the tier. While it technically 2-hit KOs Roserade, Giga Drain healing cancels out the damage and 2-hit KOs in return, and Celebi recovery will out-heal the damage as well. However, Ice Beam's 10% freeze chance can come in super clutch in a lot of situations, like the matchups I just mentioned. Even after all this, Milotic still has one other trick up its sleeve, in the form of Haze. Since Haze gets rid of all stat boosts, it's great for shutting down dangerous sweepers like Sword Stance Lucario, Nasty Plot Celebi, and Cosmic Power Metagross, allowing you to safely switch in a counter and eliminate the threat. Now, if you want to get really goofy, you can even use Mist, which prevents your team's stats from being dropped for 5 turns. This would really only be used to counter Incineroar's Intimidate and Parting Shot, so I guess if your team really struggles against him, you can use this, but probably not. Overall, Milotic is a really impressive Pokemon, probably one of the best in the tier. It has the best of both worlds. It can wall opponents while still doing massive damage and checking a lot of threats. I would definitely put one on my team. Up next is Togekiss, another really good support Pokemon. It may look cute, but this thing is a menace. Its toolset is absolutely massive, having access to Wish, Heal Bell, Toxic, Yawn, Thunderwave, Reflect, Light Screen, Tailwind, and Defog. It can do basically anything you need it to. But why bother with all that, when you can just Serene Grace Air Slash and make your opponent rage quit after flinching 18 times in a row? But seriously though, Togekiss is one of those Pokemon that suffers from 4 move syndrome. It has so many choices, but it can only pick 4 moves at a time. It could be a cleric, a supporter, a status spreader. It could even be a really good attacker with amazing coverage moves, like Air Slash, Dazzling Gleam, Ancient Power, Flamethrower, Shadow Ball, and Aura Sphere, all coming off of a meaty 120 special attack, which it can even boost with Nasty Plot. On top of this, it's super bulky, with 85 health, 95 defense, and 115 special defense, and it has access to Roost, which heals you and eliminates your electric, rock, and ice weaknesses on the turn it's used. Honestly, I don't understand how this thing is down here in RU, but that's besides the point. Let's talk about matchups. With its fairy flying typing, it does have a decent amount of weaknesses, electric, steel, rock, ice, and poison, so it does get hard countered by Pokemon like Xurkitree, Cloyster, Lucario, and others of those types. However, due to its wide range of coverage, 2 times boost from Nasty Plot, and decent speed tier, it can still check some of these counters. Boosted Flamethrower can take out most steel types before they've had the chance to kill. Shadow Ball can surprise and kill Chandelure and Alolan Marowak. Air Slash kills Roserade, while Sludge Bomb only does 80 to Togekiss. Plus, it can reliably take out a lot of other threats like Heracross, Flygon, and Incineroar. Offensive Togekiss definitely has sweeping potential, but you still need to be aware of which counters it can check and which it can't. When going for a support set, however, you need to be hyper aware at all times. Without the coverage moves necessary to hold its own, Togekiss's list of scary opponents grows rapidly. Nearly every Pokemon I just mentioned guarantees a KO on a support set Togekiss, so you need to pick your opportunities carefully. With its massive toolset, support Togekiss will definitely be a strong part of your team, being able to double your team's speed, heal teammates, spread status, get rid of entry hazards, and set up screens to half incoming damage, but you'll have to play a lot smarter to make the most of it. Whichever set you go with though, Togekiss is definitely one of the most impactful Pokemon in the tier, and will make a great addition to your team. Rhyperior, probably one of my most controversial opinions in Pokemon. People love to clown on this guy. Like, oh my god, they absolutely ruined Rhydon's evolution line. Rhyperior's so ugly, they should have just stayed with Rhydon. Well, you know what? I'm tired of it. I won't stand for any more Rhyperior slander. Screw your Rhydon, screw your Eviolite, let me introduce you to Assault Vest Rhyperior. First of all, look at these stats. Don't look down there, focus on up here. 115 health, 140 attack, 130 defense. With the highest attack stat in the tier, this thing is packing so much meat it slaps harder than Vasily Kamatsky. Now, Smogon might tell you to use Rhyperior as a Stealth Rock lead, and yeah, that's a pretty good set. With Earthquake, Stone Edge, Mega Horn, and Stealth Rock, Rhyperior can set up hazards and dish out a lot of good damage. But he gets hard countered by every water type in the tier, and a lot of special sweepers will either OHKO or 2-hit KO. This is super boring, and you have other Stealth Rock options. So this is where Assault Vest Rhyperior comes in. By maxing out your special defense and health EVs, using a plus special defense nature like Careful, then equipping an Assault Vest to multiply special defense by 1.5, Rhyperior's pitiful base 55 special defense becomes equal to a Pokemon with base 154. Combined with his ability Solid Rock, this allows Rhyperior to survive against counters that previously would have sent him straight to the Shadow Realm, and also shrug off attacks that would have otherwise 2-hit KO'd him. OHKOs like Roserade Giga Drain now do only 60, Xurkitree Grass Knot does 90, Calm Mind Suicune Scald does 65, Poltegeist Giga Drain goes from 80 to 50. I think you get the picture. Now, when it comes to his moveset, you'll obviously be using Stab, Earthquake, and Stone Edge, but you also have access to a decent amount of coverage options. To be honest though, the only one that really matters is Avalanche, a 60 base power Ice-type move that doubles to 120 if you move second, and you're pretty much always moving second. This allows you to OHKO Flygon, Noivern, Roserade, and 2-hit KO Celebi. After dozens of damage calcs, the only other move I found some niche use for was Heavy Slam to OHKO a Gardevoir running Energy Ball. So what's Rhyperior's biggest weakness? Well, definitely his speed stat. Since Rhyperior is almost always moving second, that means your opponent will always be able to damage you before you get to kill them. So despite that beefy defense, he doesn't really have a lot of staying power as a sweeper. Assault Vest Rhyperior's real use comes in the form of a wall breaker / revenge killer. Switch in after a teammate dies, kill the enemy, then wait for a chance to be healed. As long as you're smart with your cleric, Rhyperior will get a lot done. He won't be sweeping, but he can take out key Pokemon that threaten the rest of your team. Up next is Cloyster, the only ice type in the tier, and this one's interesting. Looking at his stats, you might see that whopping 180 defense and think, man, that thing must be a good wall. But you'd be wrong. With all the special attackers lurking around the tier, and that awful special defense stat, the second Cloyster comes out, a special attacker gets switched in to demolish it. Cloyster's actual use in the tier is as a sweeper. Cloyster comes equipped with an amazing ability called Skill Link that makes any multi-hit move guaranteed to hit 5 times. Along with this, Cloyster gets a Stab Icicle Spear and a great coverage move in Rock Blast. Without Skill Link, these moves are certified trash, but with it, they become 100% accurate, 125 base power physical moves with no downsides. And we're not done yet. Cloyster has access to the move Shell Smash, which drops both defenses, but raises both attack stats and defense by 2 stages. With this buff, it outspeeds every single Pokemon in the tier, and the only viable Scarf user that can outspeed it is Flygon, but his physical moveset doesn't allow him to guarantee a KO before being completely atomized by a 4-time super effective, double boosted, 125 base power, Life Orb Icicle Spear doing nearly 900% damage. I haven't done every calculation possible, but I'm pretty sure this is the strongest single attack you can possibly do in RU. So how do you counter a boosted Cloyster? Well, in all honesty, you kinda don't. The only two Pokemon I can think of which would reliably beat a boosted Cloyster one-on-one are Body Press Metagross, who can 2-hit KO and just barely survive, and a super niche special Lucario set with a priority Vacuum Wave to Oko before Cloyster gets to move. So does this make Cloyster the most overpowered Pokemon in the tier? Should he be banned to Ubers? No, definitely not. Sure, he's nearly unbeatable if he gets to boost, but that's a big if. Because of the aforementioned awful special defense and low speed tier before Shell Smash, most of the time you're getting bodied before you get to boost. Now, so far we've only talked about 3 of Cloyster's moves, but what about his 4th move slot? What do you put in there? Well, you have some choices. You could go Toxic, Substitute, maybe Light Screen to bolster his special defense, but most often you'll be seeing entry hazards, either Spikes or Toxic Spikes. Because other setters in the tier like Metagross, Rhyperior, and Klefki can't kill Cloyster in one hit, you can usually open with him and get off an entry hazard before switching out and then maybe hoping for a late game sweep. In all honesty though, Cloyster isn't that good in the tier, but he does clean up well after the rest of your team takes out his threats. Finally, a simple one. Crobat. At base 130 speed, Crobat is the fastest Pokemon in the tier, not counting Scarfs. But with his poor attack and defense stats, he's not sweeping anything. Crobat's main role is as a defog pivot. Defog to get rid of hazards, U-turn to pivot, Roost for healing, slap a Brave Bird on there in case he really needs to hit something, and voila, you have a Crobat set. Okay, I guess you have a little more variety than that. Instead of Defog, you also have access to Taunt, Toxic, and Haze. Having the fastest Taunt in the tier is really good because you're guaranteed to prevent any amount of setup from sweepers. But whatever sweeper you're trying to taunt can probably still kill you in one hit anyways, so you should probably be using this on supports. Toxic on Crobat is good because it's 100% accurate instead of 90% on non-poison types, so it's completely reliable. And Haze is really good for shutting down sweepers who have already boosted, unless they have speed boosts, in which case your Crobat is probably getting outsped and killed. In all honesty though, you're almost always better off going Defog. Being able to reliably remove hazards is super important, especially in this tier. And that's about it for Crobat. His high-speed U-turn pivots make him great at building momentum for your team, Defog keeps your team safe from hazards, and Brave Bird can be super helpful in a pinch if you really need to take out Roserade or Heracross. All in all, he's not that bad, he's just pretty simple. Incineroar, the devil of VGC. If you aren't familiar, Incineroar has been the undisputed champion of VGC since Sword and Shield came out in 2019. This is thanks to a lot of things, good typing, good stats, good moves. But most of all, it's because of his ability Intimidate and access to Parting Shot. Intimidate lowers your opponent's attack when you switch in, and Parting Shot lowers both attack and special attack before switching out. This makes Incineroar an insanely good pivot, dropping stats left and right and making opponents hit like a wet noodle. So why is he all the way down here in RU? Well, the strategy isn't nearly as devastating in singles as it is in doubles. Basically, Pokemon don't really switch too often in doubles, making these stat drops a lot more impactful than in singles where you switch nearly every other turn. Don't get me wrong, Incineroar is still great, his role as a defensive pivot makes him one of the best Pokemon in the tier, and his access to stab-boosted knockoff just makes him all the more annoying. Your basic game plan here is to whittle down your opponent or scare them out. Lower their attack on switch-in, remove their item with knockoff, and get out while lowering their stats again with Parting Shot. After 2 stat drops, most Pokemon will be completely forced to switch, allowing your next Pokemon to set up on them. You can also use Taunt to stop your opponent from using status moves, crippling most sweepers and walls who rely on boosts and recovery. Or you can use Toxic to put your opponent on a timer. As for your Fire Stab, Despite Incineroar's higher physical stat, you'll want to use the special move Overheat instead of the physical Flare Blitz, since it doesn't have recoil damage. And you won't need to worry about the special attack drop because you'll be switching out anyways. Incineroar can also be used to great effect as an offensive pivot, using Swords Dance to boost his attack 2 stages, then using 130 base power Flare Blitz to absolutely destroy a lot of opponents. Even some water types like Golisopod and Cloyster get outsped and one-shot by a boosted Flare Blitz. For this strategy, you would still want to use Knockoff for its utility and its ability to guarantee KOs on a lot of Pokemon like Gardevoir, Metagross, Chandelure, and Raikou. In the final slot, you could use Parting Shot like normal, but you can also use the damaging pivot move U-Turn. This could be a good way to help confirm kills for your teammates. Incineroar's biggest weakness though is its lack of recovery. With Flare Blitz doing recoil damage and its medium speed tier allowing for many Pokemon to hit it before attacking, Incineroar will be quickly put out of commission if you don't play smart. In addition, if you let an opponent knock off your heavy duty boots, Incineroar will be taking 25% damage from Stealth Rocks every time it switches in, which is basically a death sentence. So simply having an Incineroar on your team will require you to have a really good support Pokemon to take care of it. Next up is Xurkitree. Wait, Xurkitree? That can't be right. This is an Ultra Beast. What's it doing down here in RU? Hold on, I gotta take a look at this. No, come on, his stats aren't that bad. Yeah, they're not as good as the other Ultra Beasts, but can he really not have a niche in at least UU? Let me see his move pool. Oh god. Oh dear god, this thing is awful. You can't even call this a move pool. It's a move puddle. Okay, don't worry, this is RU. We can work with this. I mean, there's only 2 other electric types in the tier anyway, Raikou and Toxtricity, so I guess we have to. Okay, in all seriousness, Xurkitree is probably the best of the 3 electric types in the tier. Honestly, he was kind of made for the tier. Despite only having 2 coverage options, they were somehow the only 2 that he needed. Grass Knot allows him to take out the ground types of the tier, and Dazzling Gleam lets him take out Flygon, who won't die to a Grass Knot because of his dragon typing. Electric hits every other type for neutral except grass, and because of this, Roserade and Celebi are pretty much his 2 biggest natural threats in the tier, barring Pokemon with coverage Earthquake, like Heracross and Metagross. Other than that, there's not much to say about Xurkitree. Throw Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Grass Knot, and Dazzling Gleam on it, get Beast Boost, and sweep. Pivot out if you see one of the aforementioned counters, and that's all there is to it. For an Ultra Beast, this one is pretty boring, but I guess it's necessary for the tier. Let's move on to something a little more exciting, Heracross. Now, Heracross is a really popular Pokemon, definitely in contention for the most popular bug type, and I can see why. With its really impressive stat spread and great secondary fighting type, this bug can deal massive damage to a wide range of Pokemon. Looking at his stats, there is very little wasted potential here. A meaty base 125 attack and only 40 special attack, he knows exactly what he's here to do, and he's gonna do it. 80 health, 75 defense, and 95 special defense means this bug is kinda bulky, being able to take both physical and special hits fairly well, and then a base 85 speed puts him in a good speed tier, coming in just shy of the 300 mark. Heracross also comes equipped with not just 1, but 2 amazing abilities, Guts and Moxie. Guts multiplies your attack by 1.5 when statused, turning Heracross into an incredible wall breaker. Meanwhile, Moxie raises your attack by 1 stage every time you kill an opponent, giving him great potential to snowball into sweeps. With Guts, you'll obviously want to equip a Flame Orb. This immediately inflicts you with Burn, meaning your opponent can never inflict you with other worse status conditions. As a bonus, Heracross also has access to Facade, a 70 base power normal move that doubles to 140 when inflicted with status. This allows Heracross to deal really good damage on most types that would normally resist his stab, close combat, and Megahorn, like Fairy, Flying, and Poison. In fact, Pokemon like Gardevoir, Noivern, and Toxtricity get straight up O-code by this move. As his 4th move, you could either use Swords Dance or Knock Off. Swords Dance will elevate Heracross's attack stat to absolutely nuclear levels, but finding a time to use it can be difficult if your opponent has good checks like Metagross, Mimikyu, or Crobat. Knockoff, on the other hand, is a great utility move and gives Heracross the ability to kill ghost types like Alolan Marowak and Chandelure, who he otherwise can't even touch with fighting and normal. Moving on to his other ability, a Choice Scarf Moxie set allows Heracross to outspeed nearly anything you'll be facing, meaning he'll be able to rack up Moxie boosts without worrying about being hurt. Most of the Guts set applies to this as well, but instead of Facade, you could use Earthquake. This will let you kill electric types like Xurkitree and Raikou, and poison types like Nidoqueen, Tentacruel, and Toxtricity. With these two incredible sets, Heracross easily becomes one of the most powerful attackers in the tier. However, his lack of staying power means a smart opponent will be able to shut him down before he gets into full swing, so you do have to use him carefully. For the penultimate Pokemon on the list, we have Chandelure. Chandelure can be a great revenge killer or wall breaker. Its Ghost and Fire type allows it to hit nearly every single Pokemon in the tier for at least neutral damage, and with its base 145 special attack, neutral hits are still gonna hurt. Looking at its defenses, it's definitely pretty frail, especially given its 5 weaknesses in Dark, Ghost, Ground, Rock, and Water. But with a good speed tier at base 80, it can mitigate its chances of being KO'd. Because of this frailty, it's usually not a safe choice to have Chandelure switch in. He should either be pivoted through U-turn or brought out after a kill. Given this role as a revenge killer, you could play Chandelure with the Choice Scarf to guarantee he outspeeds his opponent, but his fire typing makes him very vulnerable to Stealth Rock, so unless you have a really good hazard management, you're better off equipping heavy duty boots. So what about his moveset? For Fire Stab, you'll want Fire Blast instead of Flamethrower, because it will let you guarantee KOs on specially defensive Pokemon like Cosmic Power Metagross, Registeel, and Celebi. For Ghost Stab, you can either take Shadow Ball or Hex. Shadow Ball will be more consistent, but Hex will do massive damage on statused opponents, boosting from 65 base power up to 130. This will let you guarantee otherwise unconfirmed kills on threats like Xurkitree, Specs Gardevoir, and Reuniclus. To support Hex, you'll want to have Toxic as well to guarantee that your opponent will be statused, and it's also just a great way to chip tank your opponents down into kill range for either you or your teammates. Just be careful that the opponent you're using it on doesn't have a coverage Ghost, Dark, or Water move to OHKO you. In the final slot, Energy Ball is probably your best choice because it takes care of your water weakness. It will let you confirm kills on most of the water types except Golisopod, Suicune, Tentacruel, and Sharpedo, who will outspeed you and kill first. Don't think this will save you against the ground types in the tier though. Due to their secondary typings, every single one of them will survive and will OHKO you with Earthquake. Even Rhyperior, with its 4 times weakness, will just barely survive thanks to its solid rock ability. Now before I finish off on Chandelure, I do want to talk about Alolan Marowak. Marowak is also a Ghost Fire type wall breaker in RU, but is strictly outclassed by Chandelure. Their stat spreads are extremely similar, except with Chandelure being special while Marowak is physical, but the more important difference is their speed. Chandelure is almost twice as fast as Marowak, making it objectively better in the role. In addition, Marowak is forced to hold the Thick Club item if he wants his beefy 160 attack stat, so he can't use heavy duty boots to negate Stealth Rock, meaning he can only switch in a maximum of 4 times before he dies. So yeah, if you want to use a Fire Ghost type, use Chandelure. Alright, since we started this list with my second favorite Pokemon of all time, let's end it with my third favorite, Gardevoir. Gardevoir is an amazing special sweeper, with a good type combo only giving her 3 weaknesses in Ghost, Poison, and Steel, as well as an immunity to Dragon and 4 times resistance to fighting. Looking at her stats, she definitely has sweeping potential. High special defense means she can survive against most other special attackers, and with her decent speed tier, Choice Scarf will let her outspeed and kill most threatening physical attackers, so her low defense isn't too much of an issue. For her item, you do have some freedom here to customize your playstyle. You could go Specs for max damage, Scarf for max speed, Aqua Berry for pinch healing, Leftovers for passive recovery, or you could even do an Expert Belt set to boost super effective moves without the downside of Specs. This one can definitely catch people off guard when they expect you to be choice locked into one move. Speaking of moves, Gardevoir has them, and they're pretty good. You'll always want to have Moonblast and Psychic for powerful stab, but she has a good amount of options for the other 2 slots. Energy Ball for grass coverage, Thunderbolt for electric, Mystical Fire for fire, Focus Blast for fighting, and Shadow Ball for ghost. These hit a lot of common RU types super effective, like water, ground, steel, and other psychics. For some reason, Smogon suggests running Focus Blast and Shadow Ball, but this is the worst possible choice you could ever make. Sure, Shadow Ball hits other psychic types as well as ghost types that threaten to kill you, but Stab Psychic with Specs already nearly guarantees a kill on Chandelure and Alolan Marowak, and Mystical Fire already hits 3 of the other 4 psychic types in the tier super effectively. Focus Blast, on the other hand, hits Normal, Rock, Ice, Dark, and Steel. That seems pretty good. Oh, wait. Normal, Rock, and Ice all only have one Pokemon in the tier? Well, at least it... Oh, no, Fairy already hits Dark as well. But hey, Steel is super effective against Gardevoir, so... no, hold on. We still have Mystical Fire, which hits Steel and Grass, Bug, and Ice. Hold on, Focus Blast is also only 75% accurate, so a quarter of the time it's gonna do nothing and get you killed? Why on earth is Smogon recommending this set? As the local Gardevoir expert, let me tell you exactly what you should play on your Gardevoir. Moonblast, Psychic, Energy Ball, and Mystical Fire. That's it, nothing else. Energy Ball lets Gardevoir kill every water type in the tier except Golisopod and Tentacruel, and also kills Rhyperior. Unless you took my advice and used Assault Vest Heavy Slam. And Mystical Fire lets Gardevoir kill Celebi, Choice Band Metagross, Bronzong, Lucario, and Klefki. So yeah, I'd say this is a lot better than whatever crap Smogon was trying to sell you. So, now you know all the ins and outs of Smogon Competitive Singles Gen 8 RU. Enjoy it while it lasts, because Gen 9 comes out in only a few days, and this will all be completely useless once that happens. So I guess I just wasted dozens of hours of my life making this. But seriously though, I had a lot of fun researching and making this video. I love competitive Pokemon, and this was an amazing outlet to just get all that useless knowledge out there in a fun and informative way for the small number of people who are actually interested in it. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and if you want to see more stuff like this, please leave a like or consider subscribing. I hope you all have an amazing day.